The reason why you are right here right now is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to watch this video. I am not a big YouTuber who have figured out the algorithm. I have got a tiny YouTube channel. Nonetheless, you are still right here watching me. My name is Harun Ismail and I am a Muslim e-commerce advertiser. I help Muslim brands grow through paid advertising, and I help Muslim brands stop only relying on organic marketing and brand presence. And this video is going to be a breakdown, a case study that's going to reveal why it is that you are so frustrated with your advertising, why it is that every single ad agency previously have failed you, why it is that every time you try to run meta ads that you just pure money out of the window. Now, in all transparency, I am located here in Denmark, Scandinavia, where I have two sides of my firm. On one side of my firm, I'm working with Muslim brand owners like yourself, and on the other side, I'm working with typical Scandinavian brands. For that reason, I have chosen to not showcase any of the Muslim brands that I'm collaborating with, because the Muslim industry is rather small. Hopefully you can understand that. Nonetheless, this case study of a Danish client of mine is still highly relevant for you, because it's going to reveal why it is that you are so frustrated and can grow through advertising. Hopefully you enjoyed this case study, and if you get any value from it, feel free to book yourself into my calendar directly via the link in the description, where you and I can have a brief talk to see if it would make sense to actually collaborate. Inshallah, you enjoy the video. Jazakallah khair and assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this case study. In this case study, I want to show you how I have exactly grown one of my clients' e-commerce brand called Kufr Kørhandsker by 113% profitable during his yearly Father's Day campaign. This case study is extremely relevant for you if you are the owner of an e-commerce store, perhaps the CMO, marketing manager, or just in general the person responsible for the advertising in an e-commerce store, and you have had a really hard time to break through the glass ceiling with your advertising here in 2024 due to rising ad costs, increased competition, and us consumers and society becoming more skeptical day by day towards you as an online advertiser. And if you have some of the problems that I'm going to list in just a minute, you can essentially take the measures I'm going to show you in this case study and implement yourself to see an increased return on investment on your advertising dollars. Now, that's why my primary task for the companies that I work with for my client portfolio is to essentially help them build a systematic and structured approach to their marketing mix, or essentially just build up one or two advertising platforms that can sustainably and long-term generate the results we desire, and the key words here being sustainably and long-term. Now, the primary problems that I see amongst the e-commerce cases that I essentially consult with that essentially don't have the desired success when it comes to paid advertising in 2024 is first and foremost that they lack a systematic approach to the advertising, and thereby they have a really hard time to pin out and pinpoint why exactly in the advertising funnel they have to optimize in order to see increased results. Secondly, they haven't got a holistic approach to the advertising in 2024. It's so important to have a holistic approach to your advertising, because the advertising platforms all work in a conglomerate and all essentially affect each other. And I'm talking about TikTok, Meta, Google, etc., and even your email marketing as well. Now, thirdly, they just have a lack of expert knowledge, time, and energy. And as Roald Navikant said, the more specific knowledge you have, the more you are able to leverage it, which unfortunately just leads to e-commerce owners going 2, 4, or even 6 years without having a systematic advertising platform which can generate the company long-term results and essentially help the company scale their advertising effort in a sustainably and profitable way. Now, why should you spend the next 10 to 15 minutes in my company, and why should you listen to what I have to say whilst also having a look at the case study that I'm going to present? Well, first and foremost, I want to give you the review that my client Henrik Drebol from Kufr Kørhandsker, which this case study is built upon, gave me after our initial campaign. He said himself, you can't measure passion and enthusiasm in money. There's plenty of that. The expertise and curiosity are also on point, a true pleasure, and we have many campaigns ahead of us together, and that's a review that you can see on my Trustpilot as well. Furthermore, as I said, my name is Harun Ismail, and I'm a 21-year-old entrepreneur based in Denmark, where I run my paid advertising firm, helping e-commerce brands all over the world and all over the globe scale through holistic paid advertising. And that's why that you essentially can be confident about that the measures that I'm going to give you in this case that is knowledge that is up to date, because it's knowledge that I have acquired myself over the last 2 years working 24/7. And furthermore, you can also be certain that the measures that I'm going to give you in this exact case study is measures that I use myself week in and week out in order to scale my companies and the clients that I work with. And I also wanted to give you an understanding of some of the e-commerce brands that I currently work with, but also have been working with in past. Now, this is just a select few, but you can see that I have clients here in this portfolio from America as an example, which is Salam Nutritionals, but also Denmark, where I of course live, Sweden, Germany, England, etc., etc. Now, before I essentially get going with the case study itself and essentially line out how I've grew this client 113% profitable through paid advertising, I want to tell you that the principles from this case study that you are about to see comes from the book Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. Now, all of the case studies that I have in my agency is not case studies that are built upon a shiny object. It's not case studies that are built upon tips or tricks. The case studies that I produce and the results that I produce is all due to this book called Breakthrough Advertising. And the reason why is because I focus on fundamentals and I focus on principles. And in a day of age where everybody is focusing on the new shiny object or the newest tip, trick, or whatever it might be in the ads manager, I always try to take a step back and try to compete on understanding the fundamentals of how you actually build profitable access channels when it comes to paid advertising. Now, the primary reason why I could help this client, Koffer Køhansker, and the owner Henrik to reduce his cost per action, drastically increase the number of conversions, and profit on first-time buyers, despite Henrik having already worked with several agencies before, was because we followed the criteria from Breakthrough Advertising. And if you haven't read the book yourself, I highly recommend that you do so. Now, this case study is built upon 4 steps, and I'm essentially going to walk you through the 4 steps, and I'm going to walk you through the 4 steps chronologically so you have an understanding of my approach to working with e-commerce brands and how I essentially scale this client 113%. So the first step in this case study is to understand your target audience, and it might sound simple, but if you actually saw all of the e-commerce brands out there that didn't truly understand their ideal customer profile, you will be shocked. So that's why I always myself do in-depth research of my customers or my clients' customers' target audience to really have an in-depth understanding of them, because they are essentially the people that I want to sell something to. Now, as advertisers, we must understand that we need to know our target audience better than they know themselves in order to create sustainable and long-term success with our marketing. And the primary parameters on which my target audience research is based upon is, first of all, what is my target audience mass desire? How aware is my target audience, practically speaking? And how sophisticated is my target audience, practically speaking? And these are all principles from the book Breakthrough Advertising. And when we essentially conduct in-depth research on our target audience, it becomes much easier for us as advertisers to create angles in our advertising that first and foremost resonate with our audience and also have a greater impact if we essentially hadn't essentially taken the time to do such an in-depth research of our target audience. Now, I also want to give you a clear approach or clear insight into how I approach looking at my target audience mass desire, awareness stage, and sophistication stage. Now, as you can see, I have lined out what is my target audience mass desire. And the way that I look at that is by following Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the reason why I do that is because when I'm trying to sell an offer to a target audience, I understand as an advertiser that due to first principle thinking, us as humans, we have two primary needs and we have two primary wants. The first need is wanting to mate. So we want to find a sexual partner which we can mate with and essentially create a family. And secondly, fear of dying alone. So if I understand that, and if I understand that every single human being on earth have those core desires, I can essentially try to tap into those core desires and align our advertising efforts and our advertising angles to resonate with those desires to essentially have a greater impact. Now, I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs to have an understanding of where my audience are in this specific hierarchy. Now, in this case, and that's something that you are going to see later on, that I found out that essentially having an angle of a psychological relationship between you as a father and perhaps you as a wife or spouse or children worked really well in this case. But I just wanted to essentially give you an insight into how I look at finding my audience mass desire. And when you understand by first principle thinking that every single human being has those two variations, it also becomes much easier for you to try and craft an offer and align it with a mass desire that your target audience has. Now, secondly, how aware is my target audience, practically speaking? And if you haven't heard of this term before, there is 5 stages of awareness, as you can see on the right as well. You can see that we have most aware, product aware, solution aware, problem aware, and unaware. Obviously, if you're dealing with a target audience that is, let's say, problem aware to unaware, it's really hard for you as an advertiser to essentially get conversions. And that's also why you essentially have to obsess about marketing and obsess about consumer psychology in order to succeed in those stages, because most advertisers out there focus on the most aware and product aware stages of awareness. And the reason why is because it's just drastically easier to sell to those people. Now, in this case, I focused on a problem aware audience because I fundamentally understand that if I want to scale this client, I need to talk to a larger TAM, which is a total addressable market. So if I try to go after the people who are most aware, well, I can't scale my advertising efforts because I am kept on the people who are in the most aware segment. Obviously, and a side note is that you as an advertiser will always come across people on all 5 stages of awareness when you do your marketing, because there is always a segment of the pool who is most aware, product aware, etc., etc., etc. So you also have to craft a funnel that can speak to all stages of awareness at the same time. But I focused, in this case, 80% of my marketing efforts on a problem-aware audience because I wanted long-term sustainable results, so while still having creatives and angles for a most aware audience that you are going to see in just a bit. And thirdly, how sophisticated are my audience, practically speaking? And this is a really important step to understand, because based on how sophisticated your target audience is, the more creative you have to be in your advertising efforts. Now, the level of sophistication pretty much means how skeptical are my target audience. And you can see here on the right as well, we have first to market, second to market, third stage, we have fourth stage and fifth stage. Now, if you are advertising let's say you're advertising in a blue ocean where you are first to market, and there isn't other offers trying to essentially advertise to the same market pool, well, you are first to market, and that's why that your audience isn't going to be skeptical, and that's why you also have to be direct with the audience. But let's say that you sell a shirt. Let's say that you sell this shirt that I currently have on right now. Well, fundamentally, I'm going to be a lot more skeptical because throughout my short 21 years on this earth, I have been pitched so many shirts. So I'm naturally going to be more skeptical. I'm naturally going to be more skeptical towards you as an advertiser. Not the best example, I know that, but you just have to understand how sophisticated your audience is based on how many times that your audience have been pitched similar offers. So if you are let's say that you are in a market where the audience is really, really, really sophisticated, well, then you have to essentially build a new mechanism, or you have to align with your audience as individuals. Now, if you are in a market which this client Henrik was, where the market isn't sophisticated. There isn't really that many offers. You have to be clear and you have to be concise, and you're going to see how we essentially build out advertising efforts for this client, or how I build it out for this client that aligned with the level of sophistication. Now, when you essentially do this in-depth research and you have an understanding of your target audience mass desire, awareness stage, and sophistication level, it becomes extremely, I won't say easy, but it becomes a lot more easier for you as an advertiser to develop creative angles that resonate perfectly. And if you haven't seen this ad, it's an ad from the 1900s that were printed in a newspaper, and essentially did really well, and I thought that I wanted to include it here in this case study because the fundamental here is that you just have to have an in-depth understanding of your audience. And I'm not just talking about who they are demographically. I'm talking about every single cutting edge principle that I have laid out in this case study so far to create marketing angles for your advertising efforts. Now, I actually have a live example here from the Facebook Ads Manager. You can see this was actually one of the ads that I ran for this client in the period of running his campaigns. Now, I don't really want to go in depth with the ad creative itself because, as I said, this is a Danish client, so he speaks Danish in the video, which I assume that if you're watching this video, you're probably not based in Denmark. But you can essentially see how I have built out the ad itself to first and foremost talk to the mass desire. And what we did in this case was to essentially have our offer be a bridge to have a happier dad. So we said that because it's Father's Day, you have to essentially buy your father or your husband this specific book or product. And if you don't do that, well, you are not going to have as happy of a father or husband as you could have if you essentially bought him this book. So we talked into that mass desire. Furthermore, the level of awareness. Obviously, you probably won't understand because it's in Danish, but I'm talking to a problem-aware audience and aligned it with my mass desire because I'm talking to people who haven't already bought who haven't already purchased something for Father's Day. And lastly, the level of sophistication direct in this case because there isn't really many offers similar. Stop. Now, step number 2 is optimization of our offer, and that's also a really important step in this case study. Now, one of the most essential elements for achieving success with paid advertising is your offers. And practically speaking, your offer is pretty much just the product which you are selling and how you're essentially selling that offer, the perceived value of your offer. And the reason it is so important to have a offer with the most amount of perceived value is because that's where you have the most leverage and can drive the greatest impact in your e-commerce business. Now, when I say you have to increase the perceived value of your offer, that doesn't mean that you have to compromise on your brand identity or even try to shrink your profit margin. You can essentially see this equation here, which is called the value equation by Alex Hormozi, that talks about how you as an advertiser can take your offers and increase the perceived value of your offers. So if you can essentially give your target audience their dream outcome, and if you can increase the perceived likelihood of achievement by case studies, testimonials, reviews, or whatever, the point or the perceived value of your offer is going to increase. And if you can decrease the time delay, and if you can decrease the effort and sacrifice that essentially is in relation to your offer, you are again going to increase the perceived value of our offer. Now, in this case, what I did to increase my client Henrik's offer was essentially to frame it in a specific way, because Henrik, he essentially publishes one book every single year. So this year he published his volume 4, 2024. So what I did was to frame it as an offer that you don't want to miss out on, because if he published it back in April, and let's say you buy it in October, well, yes, you can buy it in October, but you as a consumer will feel like it is a old book that you where the increased perceived value of the offer is decreased. But essentially, if the book is published in April and you buy it in May, as an example, or if I frame it as a book you have to buy ASAP and you essentially buy it in May, the perceived value will be increased. Now, furthermore, Henrik has such an understanding of cars. Now, in this case, this book is made upon cars. He is a car. He loves cars. He has a passion for cars. So I also framed it in a way that if you essentially are into cars as well, you can find a book on the market with such a level of expertise and know-how. So I also essentially gave my customers the dream outcome and essentially promised them, if you buy this book, you will get the dream outcome that you want, and you will essentially get all the necessary information about the car industry in 2024. Furthermore, he also have an encyclopedia in the book with QR codes that links to relevant YouTube videos. So if Henrik goes over a specific car, in the book he also have a specific QR code where you can essentially scan that on your phone and see a YouTube video on that car where he test drives it. So again, I increased the perceived value by essentially optimizing for dream outcome and essentially also optimizing for perceived likelihood of achievement. Now, compared to all of the other products on the market, you can see how I took Henrik's book and essentially increased the perceived value so that Henrik was the guy in the market who has the book with the essentially most amount of perceived value. And that also made it easier for us to sell the book, and we didn't have to essentially compromise on our profit margins in order to optimize our offer. And I hope this essentially gives you an inspiration to how you can take your offers and increase the perceived value of your offers. There is a bunch of ways to do it. You can make specific bundles. You can make specific offers for you can make specific offers for specific time frames, etc., etc. That's a bunch of ways to do it. Now, step number 3 is creative strategy, and an element that is also extremely essential, especially when it comes to advertising online, is content. Content is also one of the secrets behind the success of my partners on social media. On Meta, 56% of your results of your return that you see on your Meta ads is from the creatives that you use. Now, in the case of Koffer Køhans and Henrik, we had really great success with informal and down-to-earth video content. And the reason why we had such a great success with video content that almost wasn't edited, where I just scripted it to make sure that we had the right angles, is because, as you can see on the right, Henrik, he has a YouTube channel. Now, in Denmark, that's actually a pretty big YouTube channel in the industry, and because of him having built an audience on YouTube where they have an understanding of who he is, where they essentially know what type of content they essentially get, I thought to myself, and I essentially tested on keeping the content on Meta similar to the content that you see on YouTube. And obviously, if you know anything about Henrik, you will know that the content that you see on YouTube is personal, it's down to earth, it's informal, it's funny. So that's essentially why I duplicated that for Facebook, and it worked extremely well. Also want to mention that it's extremely different from case to case and company to company. But in this case, we had really great success with down to earth, informal video content. Now, I have actually taken a breakdown here of some of the creatives that we used. Now, I don't want to essentially play each ad because, as I said, again, each ad is in Danish, but you can kind of see here and have an understanding of the content we used. Now, all of these creatives were creatives that we used top of funnel, so that's primarily to people who are in a problem-aware audience, and where we essentially had the angle of, you have to buy your father or husband this book, where we aligned it with the mass desire and the level of sophistication. Stop. Now, furthermore, I also have a few examples here of static ads that we used. Now, as I said earlier, you will always reach people who are most aware and product aware, i.e. lower on the awareness stages, and just want a good offer because they are so good, they are so close to convert. So in this case, to reach the prospect in our funnel, which were which were essentially most of our product where I used static ads with social proof and essentially just giving them a logical reason to purchase, because when you see this ad, you are already warm and you already have an understanding of who Henrik is, perhaps might follow his YouTube channel, so you just want a logical reason to purchase his book. So that's what I did with these static ads. Now, step number 4 is ad account structure, and ad account structure is perhaps the most exciting chapter in this case study, and I always get asked, Harun, how do I create a structure in my ad account that is the most beneficial? And that's probably the question that I get the most amount of the time as a marketer myself. Now, I also want to tell you that the reason why that ad account structure is step number 4 is because it's the least important step in this case study. Now, it's still incredibly important, but if you have an understanding of your target audience better than your competitors, and if you have increased the perceived value of your offer, and the offer that you are currently running have a better perceived value and essentially more attractive to your target audience, and you have dialed in your creative strategy, you are going to see success with advertising on Meta. There's simply no way around it, and that's truly regardless of how you run your ad account. You can do CBO, ABO, cost cap, whatever, you're going to see success. Now, obviously, there's a wrong way to run your ads backend, and there's a right way to do it. And if you essentially align all of the steps from previous and have a bulletproof structure in your ad account, well, you can essentially be certain that you're going to maximize the results from your advertising efforts. Now, if we essentially just get going here, and with that being said, I would still love to show you the ad account structure that I built for Henrik. Now, this is in rough terms the ad account structure that I had for Henrik. So we have the overall ad account, as you can see on the top, and then we have 3 campaigns. We have a CBO top of funnel campaign, a CBO top of funnel campaign, and a CBO bottom of funnel campaign. Now, in our first CBO top of funnel campaign, you can see that we have 2 ad sets, and one ad set is with the purpose of testing different creatives and angles, and the second ad set is with the purpose of collecting winning ads, creatives, angles. And the reason why I have 2 ad sets in the same campaign where I test and scale at the same time is because that if I essentially have my budget on CBO level and give Facebook control, whilst also having my my ad sets in the same campaign, I can essentially be sure that Facebook is going to spend my ad budget where it's the most profitable. So if Facebook starts to spend more on my testing ad set, I know that I have a creative or an angle or whatever it might be that I need to duplicate and essentially insert in my scaling ad set. So that's just an easy way for me to essentially give control to Facebook and their machine learning behavior, but also also be certain that my money and my budget is going to be spent where it's most profitable. The same with the second CBO top of funnel campaign. Now, in that case, I just had a offer. I just ran that campaign with specific bundle offers, and the reason why I did that is because obviously you have higher AOV. So if I can essentially increase the AOV, I make my client even more money and he becomes even more profitable. Now, thirdly, I have a CBO with a bottom of funnel campaign. And that's just with the purpose of obviously retargeting people. Now, I actually, in most of the time, run my bottom of funnel campaigns fully broad on the ad set level. And the reason why I do that is because Facebook already do retargeting for you automatically. You can dissect that on your frequency. If you have a high frequency, obviously the same people are seeing that ad in the loop and seeing that ad over and over again, and you have a low frequency, obviously vice versa. Now, in my bottom of funnel campaigns, I run it fully broad, but I essentially make sure to have advertising angles that talk to a most aware audience, where I push a good offer and a logical reason to essentially buy, and then I dissect that on the frequency to see if I'm actually spot on. Now, essentially the last step here in step number 4. This is pretty much what you should focus on, and that's also what I focus on for my clients when it comes to the ad account. Now, first and foremost, simplicity in your ad account, that's extremely important. Leverage Facebook's algorithm, essentially run all of your campaigns with CBO budget, because you have to leverage Facebook's algorithm. It's way smarter than you and I are, so we can't try to outsmart it, and if we do, well, we are essentially just going to see decreased results. Thirdly, test primarily based on creative angles. Yes, you can do iterations on winners, but I suggest that you test on creative angles until you have a roster of angles that essentially can allow you to scale your ad account. And fourthly, optimize primarily based on your blended metrics, because that we have to understand that Facebook is a channel most of the time that sits top of the funnel, or every single time sits top of the funnel, meaning that if you have an understanding that Facebook is a channel that sits top of funnel in your overall marketing mix, you also have to look at Facebook as a medium that is top of funnel in your marketing mix, which is most of the time increasing awareness, increasing reach, but have a lower ROAS. So that's why it's so important to look at the blended metrics, because most people are trying to squeeze the highest ROAS on Facebook. But when they do that, concurrently they stop the growth of the overall company, because they don't allow Facebook to essentially get them the most amount of valuable traffic, because they want to see a ROAS 10 on their ad account. But after 6 months, suddenly their overall marketing mix just breaks down. And that's something that I have seen continuously with essentially companies that I consult with, or companies that want my help. So it's important that you look at your blended metrics and not directly look at Facebook's ad account itself. Now, overall, and wrapping up on this case study, Henrik from Cover now has a healthier and more profitable business, because he have added on a paid advertising channel that he can essentially start whenever he wants to increase the level of sales profitably in his company. And again, as Henrik said, you can measure passion and enthusiasm in money. There's plenty of that. The expertise and curiosity is also on point. A true pleasure, and we have many campaigns ahead of us together. So if you are in a case where you know that you have a lot of potential that what you are currently essentially fulfilling, and if you run an e-commerce store where you essentially also want to take it to the next level, where you want to build and scale paid advertising access channels that can help you grow your company long term, but also sustainable, so you don't have to worry about pumps and dumps in your advertising efforts and losing money every other month, you can essentially contact me on the email that I have laid here on the display, or you can also send me a text here on the email, or you can also send me a text here on my phone number that I have laid out on the display. Now, with that said, I essentially just want to essentially say thank you for your time. I hope that you enjoyed this case study. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that you can see how you essentially have to compete. I hope that you now have an understanding that you have to compete based on principles and not shiny objects if you really want to succeed with paid advertising as an e-commerce store. That was pretty much everything from my side. Thank you so much for essentially watching this case study, and I wish you a lovely, lovely day. Take care.